From our Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Zahra Syed. Our top story tonight. Israeli military analyst Amos Harel says the Israeli army wants to withdraw from Gaza, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has other ideas. Writing in the Israeli daily Haaretz, Harel says Netanyahu continues to declare that all-out war against Hamas will continue for as long as it takes. At least 22 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza in Israeli shelling since Friday morning. In the past 24 hours, Israeli airstrikes have killed 8 in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood and 3 in Qalqilia, northern West Bank. The Israeli army has confirmed the deaths of 2 military officers, Major Omer Smagda and Major General Sadia Yaakov Deri, in skirmishes. According to Israeli military figures, at least 664 soldiers have been killed and 3,871 others injured since Israel began its war on Gaza. Israel's onslaught has killed at least 37,431 Palestinians and wounded 85,653 since October 7th. Israel stands accused of genocide at the International Court of Justice. In its latest ruling, the International Criminal Court has ordered Tel Aviv to immediately halt its military operations in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. At least 36 prisoners from Gaza detained by the Israeli military since October 7th have died because of torture and harsh conditions in Israeli prisons. The Palestinian Media Office said another 54 prisoners from various Palestinian regions also have died in Israeli prisons due to torture and inhumane detention conditions. The office described Israeli prisons as mass graves for thousands of Palestinian prisoners ignored by international institutions. Based on testimonies, it detailed numerous forms of torture and inhumane treatment, including forced stripping, prolonged binding and blindfolding, electrocution, systematic starvation, and cutting the body with sharp tools. Since the beginning of the Israeli ground operations in Gaza on October 27th, Israel has detained thousands of Palestinians, including women, children, and members of health and civil defense teams. UN experts have cautioned arms manufacturers against transferring weapons to Israel, warning they could be complicit in potential violations of international law. Israel's refusal to agree to a truce in Gaza and its attempts to widen the war has created anxiety across the world. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is set to visit the Middle East next week amid growing concerns. Baerbock will arrive in Israel on Monday following an EU foreign ministers' meeting in Luxembourg. In Madrid, Spain's Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Alvarez and Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani urged a ceasefire and supported a two-state solution. Armenia on Friday recognized Palestine as a state. It also said it supports a UN resolution on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and is in favor of a two-state solution. Media reports suggest Israel has summoned Armenia's ambassador in Tel Aviv to protest the move. Last month, Ireland, Norway, and Spain also recognized Palestine as an independent state. Hate incidents in Europe against Muslims have increased since the start of Israel's war on Gaza last October. The Council of European Commission Against Racism in its annual report said Muslims received blame for the Hamas attack and other attacks in the Middle East. Muslims, particularly schoolgirls in some countries, wearing visible religious symbols or traditional clothing, were at times associated with terrorism or extremism. In some cases, Muslims were also subjected to discrimination in healthcare access, the publication said. The U.S. Treasury Department has imposed sanctions on top leaders of Mexico's La Nueva Familia Michoacana drug cartel. Sanctions include 8 Mexico-based individuals affiliated with the cartel for trafficking fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine, and smuggling migrants from Mexico into the United States. La Nueva Familia Michoacana is one of the most powerful and violent cartels in Mexico and has become a priority for the Mexican government in recent years. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the opioid crisis, and especially the rise of synthetic opioids like fentanyl, has devastated communities and killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. The Treasury Department said it has sanctioned more than 250 targets in the last 2 years for their involvement in drug trafficking activities. Human Rights Watch, or the HRW, and legal experts are urging the Biden administration to challenge Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' laws censoring discussions on racial issues in schools. The new laws limit classroom discussions of racism, as well as on sexual orientation and gender identity. The report highlights widespread fear and discrimination in Florida's public schools, where teachers and students face retaliation for addressing such issues. HRW stresses these measures foster a hostile educational environment, particularly affecting Black and LGBTQ+ communities. Released on Juneteenth this week, the report underscores ongoing challenges to inclusive education and civil rights in Florida under DeSantis' administration. The U.S. has urged strengthening the cybersecurity of global energy supply chains. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says energy systems face continuous cyber attacks and are vulnerable to disruption. He notes that the G7 nations will work to establish a collective cybersecurity framework for operational technologies for manufacturers and operators. The Department of Energy has released new supply chain cybersecurity principles. It lists the actions needed to deliver strong cybersecurity throughout the global supply chains that build energy automation and industrial control systems. Trump's spiritual advisor resigns amid molestation allegations. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Today we're talking with Bilquis Abdulkader about her decision to keep her hijab in the face of a FIBA ban, which banned her from becoming a professional athlete. It doesn't seem like it was a burden for you. It seemed like it was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. Like it's inspirational, you know?
It gave me purpose. I would have been the first hijabi to play at the pro level. I think basketball kept me from having to make that tough decision of like, oh, if I wear my hijab, I can't play. I loved it so much that nothing was gonna keep me from it. Most of us, or many of us, will go through a test where Allah is asking us to choose Him.
There's nothing more important than holding on to your Islam. Your career, it can change.
Every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Muslim Network TV.
Welcome back. A Texas megachurch pastor who was once a spiritual advisor to Donald Trump has resigned following allegations of molesting a 12-year-old girl in the 1980s. 62-year-old Pastor Robert Morris of Gateway Church admitted to engaging in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady during his early 20s when he was married with a child. Alleged victim Cindy Clemishire claims the abuse occurred on Christmas Day in 1982. When Morris invited her into his room and touched her inappropriately. Morris's resignation comes after his partial admission in a statement to the Christian Post. Morris did not mention the girl's age, but Clemishire told the religious watchdog blog, The Wartburg Watch, that she was only 12. Former President Donald Trump's presidential campaign has received a $50 million boost from the conservative billionaire Timothy Mellon. The super PAC fund MAGA Inc. reported receiving more than $68 million in donations last month. Mellon contributed $50 million and another $10 million came from Liz and Dick Oyland. The donation from Mellon, an heir to the Mellon banking family, came a day after Trump's conviction on 34 charges related to falsifying business records in New York. Mellon previously has been a major donor to independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., supporting the pro-Kennedy super PAC American Values with at least $20 million. This influx of funds has allowed pro-Trump groups to outspend President Joe Biden's allies in campaign efforts. A Richmond, Virginia man wrongly convicted in 1976 for abduction, rape, and murder of a 3-year-old has been exonerated after nearly 44 years in prison. Marvin Grimm, sentenced to life in prison, was released on parole in 2019. The exoneration came Tuesday following new forensic evidence, including DNA and toxicology reports, presented by Grimm's legal team. The Virginia Attorney General's office issued a writ of actual innocence, affirming Grimm's wrongful conviction. The court order said no rational fact finder would have found Grimm guilty, as there was no conclusive evidence against him. A total of 1,170 people have died during this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Temperatures soared to 125 degrees Fahrenheit at the Grand Mosque, Islam's holiest site. Saudi Arabia is heating 50% faster than the Northern Hemisphere average. It faces projections that could render Mecca dangerously hot for 182 days annually by 2050. Activist group Climate Defiance criticized inadequate climate action and is emphasizing the peril worshippers face while practicing their faith. Meanwhile, in the United States, nearly 100 million people endured scorching temperatures exceeding 90 degrees Fahrenheit on the first day of summer this week. A recent study has shown a sharp increase in assaults on educational institutions worldwide. The Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, or the GCPEA, highlights that 10,000 students and teachers were killed or harmed in 6,000 attacks between 2022 and 2023. Israel's war on Gaza and other issues saw universities raising their voices and facing the consequences affecting long-term stability and recovery efforts. The report underscores a 10% rise in attacks compared to previous years, with explosive weapons often used. Jerome Marston of GCPEA emphasized that these assaults average 8 per day, hinder educational access, and jeopardize future prospects. The study links these incidents to broader conflicts and environmental crises, urging global adherence to the Safe Schools Declaration. In late March 2022, a suspected armed group allegedly looted a school canteen in Komango village in Burkina Faso on 2 consecutive days. In November 2022, a suspected armed group allegedly attacked the school and looted its canteen in Fatakara village, Mali. Human rights groups are demanding urgent action from the United Nations on reports of human rights abuses in the Chinese-occupied East Turkestan region. They have sought updates on a report published nearly 2 years ago about a range of rights violations by the Chinese government in the region known as Xinjiang. The report mentions severe violations such as torture, forced sterilization, and sexual violence being perpetrated on the Uyghur and other Muslim minorities in the region. Despite international outcry, China has dismissed the findings as baseless propaganda. At the recent UN Human Rights Council session, concerns were raised over the lack of substantive follow-up on the High Commissioner's report. Critics argue the Commissioner's engagement with China lacks transparency and fails to address ongoing abuses adequately. Meanwhile, rights groups continue to press for broader international awareness and action to address the plight of Uyghurs and other minorities in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. Grimm's case highlights the impact of modern forensic advancements in correcting historic injustices. His exoneration marks the end of a decades-long battle for justice and raises questions about the reliability of past convictions based on outdated evidence. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. Your support is needed more than ever to continue our mission of providing informative, educational, and inspiring content to Muslims in North America and around the world. Donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.